Welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Join us here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first. Michael N. Riley worked for a rural electric co-op in New Mexico as a meter tech, accident investigator, and he handled high bill complaints, all of which played a role in his book, High Lonesome, Arch Series, Book 2.
Yeah, I did. A lot of it is because, when I read meters, a lot of old men would just wait to have somebody to visit. They knew about what time of the month I was going to show up, and we would have like 20, 30-minute conversations and things like that. So I ran into a lot of old-timers, old cowboys, old farmers, people that came in on covered wagons. Their parents came in on covered wagons, and they were born in a tent, stuff like that. So it wasn't uncommon to meet some of the original pioneers that settled in that area.
Had you ever written before?
No, I haven't, but it's kind of like a lot of people. They have a story in their head, they just don't know how to put it down in paper. And my father came down with dementia, and he was in a memory center, and he had cancer. And there were a lot of things going on with him, and the outcome was not going to be good, So actually, I thought, well, I'll write a story about him. But when I sat down behind the keyboard and started pounding out the story, this story developed about a man by the name of Doc Stafford and how he formed a town called Portales and what his visions were for the future. And that's how the story kind of came about. So
Arch Series Book 2, there was a Book 1.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Are they standalone books?
Well, the first book, there's two characters that are in the second book, Jules Davis and Jefferson Davis, and they're the bad guys in the book. And the story starts out about Jefferson being in the New Mexico State Pen, okay, because he got arrested in Book 1 for attempted murder.
Okay.
And Jefferson escaped. So if you don't know the backstory of why Jules is in prison, Book 1 explains it.
Okay.
I published it 2.5 years ago. Okay. I went with Writers Republic because they reached out, and I just want to say that I was not happy with the results of what Writers Republic. Fulton has done such a remarkable job with the audiobook and the publishing and the marketing. And the difference between Writers Republic and Fulton is Fulton has been a little bit slower pace, they're a little more thorough, they're not in a rush to everything, and Writers Republic is hurry up, get your money, and let's get this out there.
Yeah. Right.
So
what happens here?
Okay, High Lonesome. You got to remember the situation of what the New Mexico Territory was like. You had a lot of people, especially from the Confederate states, moving into the territories, okay? Mm-hmm. And you had a lot of people from the North moving into the territories because it was free land, and it was all about land. And people wanted a fresh start, just making a fresh start. And these little towns, especially in eastern New Mexico, were popping up. And some of them made it, some of them didn't. But Portales, for some reason, there were two towns, two sister towns. One's called Riley Switch, which later on changed its name to Clovis, and then Portales, which is about 20 miles south of Riley Switch. Okay. So the railroad comes in, and Doc Stafford was in on the ground when Portales was just first starting out. It was just a windmill and a couple of little businesses, and mostly ranchers were in that area. And Doc built a saloon and a mercantile and a lumber yard. The town was growing, and then the railroad come in, and it really started growing. And Doc wanted to bring in doctors and lawyers, and most importantly, he wanted to bring in women.
Oh.
Okay, because you had a very unruly atmosphere, which was mostly men and cowboys, and the women that were coming were prostitutes, and Doc wanted women that were more marriable.
Okay.
So he had a friend that he met during the Civil War, and his name is Patrick Arnold, and he had 8 daughters, and he was a widower, and he was a Baptist preacher. And Doc talked him into coming to Portales because he would build him a church, because if you have religion, the law will come and become more civilized, be less debauchery going on. Well, Jules and Jefferson Davis ran a brothel and a saloon. And they caught wind of what Doc was up to, and they weren't going to put up with it. Okay. So that's the gist of book 1. They have a shootout, and Jules winds up in prison. Jefferson's on the run. Okay. And High Lonesome starts with Jules in prison, and he is a very aggressive person. And he winds up killing a couple of the inmates that beat him up and stuff like that. And he gets sent to the hole. And then the story starts back in Portales, and Doc has his new sheriff. It's Thomas O'Brien. He's from a New York cop, and the town is just flourishing. And we find out that Jules and Jefferson Davis weren't independent owners. They were involved in what was called the network. And an investigator from the Pinkerton shows up, and Doc starts talking to him, and he finds out that what the Davises were doing, they were kidnapping women off the trains and selling them into the white slave market that was going on at that time. And this was really going on during that time frame. And they were putting them into brothels, or they were selling them off to minors as wives. So there was money to be made kidnapping single women on trains.
Wow.
And the Davises were involved in it, and the network, which consisted of former Confederates, were involved in it too. So a character shows up to Portales, and his name is Emmett Carlson. And he was a colonel in the Confederate Army, and he is kind of like the enforcer of the network. And he comes to Portales, and he's laying claim to the saloon, and he wants to start it back up. Well, Doc thought that since Jules is in prison, he would just take over the saloon, and they made it into a hotel. That's how the story's heading.
Good story. Really good story.
It is a good story. Both of them are. And
I guess you pulled on a lot of the experiences of the people that you met.
Yes.
And your dad.
Well, what it was, my parents were first generation. I'm second generation from that area. Okay, so when you're talking about the territories, you're talking about the Four Corner area. You're talking about New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and Colorado. And they were the last 4 states of the lower 48. But people really didn't start moving there until the late 1800s. Okay, so there are a couple of things that came into play. One of them is the Homestead Act, where they would get 40 acres. And then there was also just the availability of land that you didn't have to grub trees out, because, being up here in the Northeast, there's trees everywhere. That's something we don't have. So the land was easily plowable, and then they found out that there's water underneath the ground and an abundant supply, and then the agricultural aspect of that area just boomed. Okay.
Right.
So I'm the second generation from New Mexico, and our typical day weekend was, Saturday you did your grocery shopping, Sunday was church, and then you would go see the grandparents down in Portales. We would drive down to Portales and visit my mom's mother, who actually came in a covered wagon, homesteaded down in a area called Mill and Sand, which later on was in the Permian Basin, which is a big oil field down in Texas and New Mexico. When you hear them talking about baby drill, it's mostly in the Permian Basin in that area. That goes all the way into West Texas and a little bit into East Texas. It's a big oil field area. and then moving into Portales and working as a cook for school system. My other grandparents, they moved to a community called Arch, and they were farmers. So this is where the title, the first book called Arch, comes from, is because that's where my dad was born and raised at, was in Arch. So.
And this isn't the end of the series.
Yeah, I have book 3 in the process. I'm about 3/4 through with it, but like time is just getting behind the keyboard and resuming the writing.
All right.
Because, you read it and you go, well, I don't know if I like that or not,
Yeah.
Maybe I can do this a little different. But it's a good story, too. It's about the homesteaders.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. The therapeutic benefits of writing are well known, and Paul J. Carter discovered that firsthand after his divorce when he wrote his children's book entitled Daddy, Where Are You Now?
Right. Well, actually, the interesting thing about that was the divorce had happened a very long time ago. I haven't been with their mom for the better part of like 14, 15 years. It was really where I started writing this book shortly after that, when I was going through the process. And I didn't quite know how to really sort through my feelings or, really, is this what I wanted this to be known for, that type of stuff. And, in the meantime, what happened was I became involved with someone else very special in my life, and she kind of took me in a different direction. About 5 years later, it had ended, and I picked up the book again. But the thing that it was, as I went along, I didn't realize that I was kind of, struggling with other things. Like I was having trouble, grasping with the fact that I wasn't always seeing my kids on a daily basis. I wasn't, part of their everyday lives, and never knew how to deal with it.
So during those 14 years, were you in their lives?
All the time, as much as I could. But here's the thing. I made a decision a long time ago that I wasn't going to have them back and forth all the time, and coming to and from and every which way. And I just wanted them to have kind of like a stable environment, a stable life, So basically, we'd just see them every other weekend and every Wednesday and the holidays and birthdays and all that good stuff, right?
Okay.
And it really kind of worked out for them to a very large degree.
You were putting them first.
Well, I still knew I had to kind of get myself back together, right? And so, it was an adjustment, but it still kind of left me, where am I going with all this, right? It's not what I wanted. It's not what I expected. And, so when I picked the book back up, the surprising part is that I didn't quite feel the same about maybe 3/4 of stuff that I wrote down initially. It was too wishy-washy. It was too back and forth. Right. And, ultimately the final version was punchy and to the point, and it had meaning, and it was, coming from a father's point of view that may or may not be so often pronounced or often shared or whatever, but it was one that I decided was best, right? It was the way I wanted to try to, explain things. And
so how do you tell your story?
Well, yeah, it's really from a point of view type of writing style more than anything. And the two kids are actually my kids. And, you're trying to be sympathetic, empathetic. You're trying to, ensure your children that, hey, I'm not here at the moment, but I'm not going anywhere far. I'm not running away from you and I'm never going to see you again type of situation. And so as it goes along, it becomes more of I'm letting you know I'm always going to be here for you. There's some life's lessons in between along the way. This is kind of what I expect you to understand and how I hope this is for you. Even though I'm not there, this is how I expect you to kind of behave. This is how I expect you to kind of, be respectful and self, aware. And the whole premises of the book was just about love and hope. Mom and dad are not together anymore, but this is how things are going forward, right? And, The father in a way is there to proclaim his love for his children, even though it didn't work out with the mother. He takes the time to be part of their life. He encourages them. Like, on the one page, it's like, I think about you night and day, and words of love, right? It was, and that's where that love and hope comes from. My love for you is like a bright sunny day. It never diminishes or fades, right? No matter what, the sun's still going to come up, right? They're on a roller coaster, and he just explains to them, life has its ups and downs.
Okay.
On the following page, I don't want you to frown, because, he's trying to tell his children, there's going to be, life's going to be some point not be so great, other points are going to be great. It's just a matter of kind of balancing life and, doing what is right, doing what's best for them, doing, but not to ignore, their father, not to ignore their mom, because, in the end, my hope for my children is that they never have to go through that process in their own, right? I kind of sum up the divorce, probably the worst thing that ever happened to me in my life, to this point. And it certainly wasn't taken lightly in any way possible, shape, or form, honestly. The message is simply, always stay in touch with your parents, let them love you, you love them, never give up, always be part of their lives, and it's just meant to be inspiring is what it really is. And it's very animated. It's very illustrated nicely by Fulton Books.
Okay.
And, every little page has its meaning behind it. Every little thing has, something from my kid's life that has meaning. One page, it has my daughter kicking a soccer ball and my son playing the saxophone. Those are, individual things they've done in their lives or to some degree still do. Mm-hmm. At the end of the book, it has a sun setting. That's obviously designating the end of the book. But, I didn't realize, I was so shocked on how the book turned out as far as illustration wise. And I wasn't quite expecting that to be that nice about the book. Another example, on the page with the roller coaster, that's something that I always did with my children. It wasn't something their mom was really necessarily into. But it was also, creating those memories with my children that weren't ever going to be taken, regardless of how things were to turn out for me or will turn out or could have turned out. It just still designates the time that as a father, I still, made them as a priority.
Do your kids know that you've written this book?
Yeah, they have. They're both in their early 20s.
Okay.
They're doing quite well, actually. And that was my main concern because, a lot of times with broken households, it doesn't turn out too well when there's not both parents present, right? And that's just kind of fact of life. But they're both doing well.
So that's great.
Yeah, it really is. I'm very happy for them. And there's a lot of books out there about this subject. There's a lot of books about it. Separation, divorce, all that stuff. And the funny thing is, when I was kind of researching it, I'm really not sure if I found any book that kind of gave the same point of view from a dad's perspective. What I'm looking at was kind of, done in the kind of a unique point of view about things.
Do you feel better now that the book's out there?
Yeah, what's really interesting about that? The book was kind of like a self-healing journey. It just took longer than I expected, because I had started the process immediately after the divorce had started, and it was years, before it was finished. But it was quite the self-healing process. And, it'll probably go down as being one of my most important accomplishments, right up there with, graduating from college and, having children and, being married. It'll fall right up in that category. It honestly will, by all means.
That's great,
Absolutely.
Paul.
So, I was quite honored and pleased the fact that Fulton, wanted to take a chance on me and, help make one of my dreams come true, because that's really what it is, bottom line.
Right.
It's about making a realized dream come true.
Well, I'm glad you were able to accomplish that, Paul.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a long time coming. I look forward to many years with ReaderHouse and everyone else for that matter.
We love that.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
Thank you, Les.
Linda Yvonne Vandermade was an English major in college, and she always wanted to write a book, but took a couple of years to get the inspiration for Maui Musicale.
Suddenly I came up with the idea for the book, so I decided to write it. It came very easy. It was not hard at all, but at the time I was taking drum lessons. I had bought a drum set, and so I was into music. In the past I've played piano and guitar, so I like music, and I have 3 grandsons that they're now living in the Middle East. They moved away. I used to love to read stories to them all the time. We had lots of children's books. And then a year ago in August, the fires broke out in Lahaina on the island of Maui. And so it was a kind of a culmination of all those things together. I was out for a walk on a beautiful fall day. It was bright and clear and cool. And I just thought of the idea, and when I was out on a walk, and then as soon as I got home, I got on the computer and I wrote the plot and the idea, and then I wrote a description of all the characters that I wanted in the book, and I did quite a bit of research, tried to get some animals in the book that are native to the Hawaiian Islands, and other animals from around the world, and try to give them Hawaiian names. So I had to look up some things here and there to make sure that I had the right meaning for the names for the animals. And then I just kind of it took about 2 hours, and then I set it aside and I said to myself, okay, a week from today, Saturday, you're going to write the whole story. So I just left it alone, and then a week later, on a Saturday afternoon after lunch, I got back on the computer, and over the course of 6 hours, I wrote the whole story, the dialogue, and everything. And not knowing how to publish a book, I told my sister about it, and she has a lot more money than me, and she paid for Fulton Books to publish the book.
Have you ever been to Maui?
No, but my sister's been there many times, and she said we were going to go there, but I have not yet seen her make any plans to go to Maui. She's been there many, many times.
So it was just that tremendous fire in Lahaina that struck
right.
you. Yeah.
Right. And that's mentioned in the book on the last few pages, where the animals get together and they decide to hold a benefit concerts to support the people of Lahaina. Honu is the turtle who starts out the book. He plays electronic piano, and a neighbor moves in, Jamal the camel, and Jamal plays electric guitar. And in Hawaii, everybody has their windows open, and he hears his neighbor playing guitar, so he asks his friend to come over, and they start playing together, and they decide to start a band. So they draw a poster, and they go to the Maui music store near where they live, and that's what's on the cover of the book also, Maui Music Store. And they put a poster in there, and they get some more band members to come play with them. And then one of the band members is in a band at the high school and says, I'll ask my friends if they want to join the band also. So they end up with 8 people in the band. And then Honu, the guy who started the band, he tells them, well, we need a name for the band. What should we call it? So that's why it's called Maui Musicale, Musicale with an E on the end means a musical gathering.
Sweet.
The message of the book is that the band has a purpose and that they want to help the people of Lahaina by having benefit concerts and raise money to help. So it's a good feel book about, helping somebody else by getting together and doing something beneficial.
Are you able to go out and read the book to kids or do a book signing?
We sold a bunch of books at a craft fair for $20, stating that all the money would go to the Maui Red Cross fire victims. And so we ordered 100 books on our own and just been selling them here and there, different places.
Well, the craft fair sounds like that was a good idea.
Yeah, the craft fair. We're going to do another craft fair in December. And then I was working for a while at a gift shop out in Bodega Bay, and they let me bring a stack of books, and we sold them out there. And it was, selling about 6 books a day.
That's great.
Yeah, so.
Linda, I hate to tell you this, but I think you might have to go to Maui.
To sell them books.
To do a book signing.
Yeah. Okay.
What a sweet book. And you are donating the funds.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. That's great stuff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you too very much.
Edward C. Knox believes what goes around comes around, and it is at the heart of his book, Karma's Deadly Kiss. And you say back in 2008, inspiration hit you. What happened?
At the time, lady I was in a relationship with, she was a makeup artist, and we were on a set of a play that was being produced. And, I got the chance to look at the screenplay and just see how things come together. And I was like, well, I've always had a kind of interest in writing, being a creative person. And so, I just started writing my first screenplay. And then it just evolved into, writing books, writing a novel. So this is my first novel that I wrote, and then I'm finished another one, and I'm already contemplating a sequel to this first one.
Okay, so tell me, what's the book about?
In a nutshell, it's about a mysterious entity coming into play, seeking revenge on a particular person, all the while ended up eliminating many, in its path. So it's like a mystery, kind of supernatural type of thing. Valencia Tuckett is the main character. She's the one that this entity is after. And, she's like a singer in a nightclub. And, her aunt is like the manager. So she's another Renetta is another main character. And so as this entity is, at first it's a complete mystery. No one knows what's going on. And then after a while, it reveals itself, and it almost gets her, but she gets away, and they end up. Well, it takes place initially in St. Louis, and then they eventually move to Atlanta.
Okay.
And then somehow the entity follows them there, and chaos starts all over again.
So we've got a club owner that's targeted for murder because he's not a good guy.
Right.
So
right.
What happens? Like what goes around comes around kind of thing?
Yeah, that's what the karma is. This is kind of ends up being centered around her and her aunt, because he's more or less he's definitely after her because of he knows she's the one that killed him, but I don't want to give the complete story away like that.
What is it that you want the reader to come away with?
That you basically reap what you sow. You put bad energy out, you are usually going to get it back, and it's not always going to be something that you can handle. Sometimes it's going to be above and beyond, kind of life-threatening. So that's the ultimate message. Don't put out the energy that you don't want to receive.
When you go out and talk about your book,
mm-hmm.
What do you say about it?
Well, for instance, my mother goes to a senior citizens center. They have a couple of events coming up. So,
They read your book and then you come in and talk about it with them.
oh yeah, yeah,
You're enjoying this whole writing experience.
oh yeah. It's
Yeah.
yeah. It was something actually getting my copies in the mail and just actually having it in my hand, and then knowing that it's going to be digitally, people are able to get it digitally. That's kind of fascinating. Yeah.
Right. All right. So now we're moving on to the next book.
Yeah, I've started writing a sequel to this one, but I have another one that's already completed. I just
Wow.
yeah,
Okay. So you're on a roll.
yeah.
All right, Edward.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the Reader House Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. We hope to see you back here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.